was the first undisputed fighter in the history of boxing in 168. So for me, that made me feel proud, and it made me feel so happy because at the end of the day, I want to make history, and this is huge.
High pressure, cold precision, Mexican spirit, unprecedented power, and championship discipline. Saul Canelo Alvarez is one of the best boxers in the world today, having come a long way and thorny way to the top. He is ranked high in all the rankings. He is very popular, and he keeps on fighting despite his rich financial situation. He cleared several divisions, and now he is looking for a new opponent from other weight classes, but the most obvious contender at the moment is David Benavidez, the guy who beat former champion Caleb Plant. We've decided to look back at the times when opponents of the super middleweight champion had some regrets about getting in the same ring with him. Friends, make yourself comfortable and get ready to watch. You're on Gloved Gladiators. Let's go. 5th place, Ryder. Alvarez's last opponent to date, second title defense as outright champion against an experienced opponent and top super middleweight boxer Ryder. He has already once fought for the belt against Callum Smith, but could not withstand the pressure of his opponent. Since then, he went on a winning streak and won the interim WBO belt. In doing so, he became a legitimate contender for the title, an experienced and strong opponent worth teaching a lesson and showing the difference in class. At the same time, the story of the development of the fight was quite calm. There was no dislike between the opponents, as was the case with many opponents before. The fact that he was fighting in his native Mexico gave today's hero special energy.
Are welcoming Canelo back home to the city.
Even so, during the fight, Saul was assertive and aggressive as always towards his opponent in the ring. From the very beginning, Alvarez established his dominance and began to crush his opponent with blows. Body, head, even on the block came some very heavy blows. Another challenger could not resist the champion, and by the 5th round, his face was already covered in blood. Saul knocked him out in this round and gave his opponent a good nose test. The smashing course of the fight continued, and only in the end was able to take some initiative and outbox the already tired Mexican. However, the fight still ended in a smashing victory. After this, a video emerged of Ryder sitting in the locker room, and it was clearly seen that his hands were covered with horrific bruises from the Mexican's blows. A truly terrifying force.
Looks like I got a suntan the blood. They bit wonky, John.
4th place, Callum Smith. Now, let's go back in time and talk about the fight against Callum Smith. At that time, Saul had not yet fully moved up to super middleweight and alternated fights in different weight classes. In December 2018, he won the WBA regular belt in that category against Rocky Fielding, and after that, he had several more fights, defeating Daniel Jacobs, defending the middleweight belt, and knocking out Sergey Kovalev at light heavyweight for the WBO belt. But he got tired of bouncing around in weight classes, and the Mexican decided to establish dominance in the super middleweight division. The holder of the WBA belt was Callum Smith, who had an undefeated record, many knockouts, and the Muhammad Ali trophy. And very good records at that, but he still took the fight against the Mexican juggernaut. For the Brit, it was his 3rd title defense, and he faced probably the most dangerous fighter in his career. Despite all the risk, though, Smith recognized his opponent's regalia and considered him a worthy opponent.
Once I've won my world title, now I want the biggest fights possible. I want to test myself against the biggest names in the sport, and Canelo certainly is that. Proven he's done multiple weights. He's a superstar. He's the pound for pound best. But I believe I'm good enough to compete at that level also. I've proved I'm a world-class fighter. Now I want to prove I can compete at the elite level.
Nothing but respect. But there can be only one winner, especially when Smith was the underdog before the fight. Alvarez saw the fight as a very important event in his career, but understood that the advantage was on his side and took full use of it.
No, ya sabíamos que es peleador muy alto, pero aparte pues tiene muchas cualidades boxísticas también, que eso lo hace aún más completo. Pero pues con mi experiencia en mi nivel, en mi nivel tengo que adaptarme a cualquier situación y tengo la experiencia y las habilidades para poder sobrellevar esto y sé lo que tengo enfrente, pero estamos listos para esto.
Yes, we do know that he's tall. We also know that he has great boxing qualities, so that makes him dangerous. But with my experience and the level of my boxing, you know, we're ready for this to continue making history and taking risks like this. This is what I'm here for.
The difference in size was simply gigantic. The difference in his hand size was enormous. 20 centimeters in Smith's favor. Standing next to each other, Saul looked like a younger brother looking for a good beating from his older brother. Plus, there was a revenge aspect to this fight. 4 years earlier, Canelo had beaten Callum's older brother, Liam Smith. But let's get to the main event. The bout started with a measured pace, with Saul slowly going forward with his defense up and was able to take the lead at the end. From the second round, the Mexican revealed his working plan for the fight: constant pressure and power punches to the body. He pushed his opponent up against the net with a full blast to the body, periodically reminding him that he also had to defend his head. Saul used his block and head movement to slowly get to his opponent and charge at him with all his might. With each round, the number of punches only increased. Starting with round 4, Canelo only began to get better and took round after round at the expense of heavy blows. We've said many times that Smith is a good fighter with top-notch skills, but in this fight, he became just a big punching bag. In a calm manner but with furious punches, today's hero gradually took the fight in his favor and won by a confident unanimous decision with scores of 119 to 109 twice and 117 to 111.
Canelo Alvarez is the super middleweight champion of the world and the middleweight champion of the world, and still, of course, he looked tremendous here tonight.
Third place, Billy Joe Saunders. After winning 2 super middleweight belts at once, 2 weren't enough for Saul, and he went straight for a third. To be exact, he wanted to go. Before that, he got a little-known boxer from Turkey, Avni Yildirim. The fight was already over in the third round by knockout in favor of today's hero, and then he was ready to go for more achievements and belts. His opponent was Billy Joe Saunders, who carried the WBO belt around his waist, another undefeated boxer for whom the next fight was his third title defense. At first, his opponent was supposed to be Caleb Plant, who held the IBF belt. However, Saunders became the opponent, and he was annoyed with the attitude of the fans and the management towards him.
Well, it's a bit. I'll tell you what, I'm a bit disappointed because he's already planning venues for the Caleb Plant fight. You know, it's one of them. People can say what they want, and you know, you got this shot, and people look at fuck the money, fuck everything. I'm here to win. You know, he also told me the other day that I did this deal on the basis of English judge, American judge, and a Mexican judge. Then when he came here the other day, it was no, the English judge now no English officials allowed. So, you know, I'm still not got to the bottom of that yet, and I'm not happy. I'm waiting to hear something back from someone, but...
He was the clear underdog and intended to ruin the Mexican fans' bets. Billy presented the fight as muscle versus brains, and the brains were on Saunders' side. The fight took place in Texas, which has a very large Mexican population, and there was a national holiday the day before the fight. It all added up to each other and resulted in the arena being filled to 73,000 people. A huge Mexican fan base showed up to support the local hero. The first round started out measured on the part of tonight's hero, but his opponent decided to take a starting cut. He did a great job of jabbing the Mexican. Saul gave him a little head start, and from the second round on, he became more aggressive. He stayed away from exchanges, but he countered every time he came at him. Like a robot, his head was tracking his opponent's actions, and he charged toward him perfectly and staggered him a couple of times with heavy blows. From round 3 onward, an equal bout based on what Saunders had said earlier began. A battle of the mind and the muscles. A maximally equal bout with Billy working methodically with jabs and technical series, and Canelo hitting rare power blows to the body. Extremely competitive fight, but all hint of competition ended in round 8. The Mexican picked up the pace sharply, and after the first minute of this cut, increased the number of punches and had already read his opponent's actions. Hits to the body, to the head, to the block. He understood his opponent's thoughts and noticed how often he ducked under the punch and began to throw trickery through the air to meet him with tough uppercuts. He caught such wild courage that after especially good blows, he raised his hands and encouraged the crowd to cheer.
He's like a matador!
Like a champion of the Coliseum. The fighter went to the corner, and the arena audience waited for the next round of action. But the Saunders team refused to continue the fight, and later it turned out that after one of the Mexican's blows, his opponent's orbital bone broke. At this point, everyone was once again convinced that the power of Mexican fists was a force to be reckoned with.
They have stopped the fights. It is over. Canelo gets the knockout win. I'm not sure what happened to the corner of Saunders.
Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. Saul Canelo Alvarez.
Second place, Caleb Plant. And here comes the sensational bout with the IBF super middleweight champion, Caleb Plant. A man with a hard fate and the path he took to get to the title. He started to do it for his daughter, but even after the loss of so much loved ones, he didn't lose his former discipline. The Mexican had only one belt left in his collection before becoming the undisputed champion. Like Thanos, he went through all his opponents and demolished them in a dominating fashion. Only one stone was left for the cherished goal. Not just the belts were at stake, but the title of the first undisputed champion in the category. The stakes were high, and also the tension between the fighters. From the very beginning, there was a tense relationship between them. Caleb, as the more composed and aggressive of the two, was considered the most dangerous fighter in his weight class, a technical and fast fighter who had all the necessary data to win. The tension between the fighters was so huge that during face-to-face before the press conference, they had a scuffle with slaps.
Don't get paid. No, it's okay.
Canelo even caused a small abrasion to his opponent after the punch. And all this happened because Caleb said the word motherfucker. And Saul took it as an insult because of the language barrier. The fighters were separated and a real trash talk battle began.
You will hear the words, and the new undisputed super middleweight. The only difference is right after that, you'll hear the words, and still undefeated. Mark my words. That's funny? You think that's funny?
A little bit.
Yeah? Well, keep laughing. You keep laughing, mother. You know when you gonna find out? And you
mother-
know find out the same time everybody else found out. And you know when that was? You know when they found out? When it was too late. That's when they found out. And that's exactly when you're gonna find out. Mark my words. And you know the only difference between you and him is he's a fat the fuck you and you a drug cheat. And you a drug cheat. Tell me something. Oscar Valdez can pop positive for something and not get suspended for 6 months?
Such an important fight has turned into a personal showdown, and this is the best way to do it. It's the only way the fighters won't feel sorry for each other and will give it their all. So let's get to the fight. Caleb chose the right tactics for this kind of opponent and worked as gently as possible away from his heavy hands, the power of which had already been felt at the press conference. He worked with his jab, he was fast and agile. The Mexican worked in his usual manner, breaking his opponent's body with power punches. Plant chose to protect his body as much as possible from the blows, but left his head open. He dodged many of the hits, but often the blows still made it to his head. Caleb did not stay in debt and responded with his own punches, but their power was no match for what the Mexican offered. The fight went at this pace for several rounds, but after the equator of the meeting, Canelo began to increase his pressure and began to work even more actively on the body. Gradually, his opponent's gas tank was reaching the minimum mark, and then Saul rushed for the knockout. In the 11th round, he pinned his opponent to the ropes and threw a serious heavy punch, then threw a right uppercut. Plant had enough strength to get up, but within seconds, he was pinned again against the ropes and knocked out. After the fight, the fighters embraced and had a heart-to-heart talk. Caleb explained what he meant with his words at the time and said good wishes. So Alvarez became the first undisputed champion in this category and the 6th in history. And all this in just 1 year of being in the category and in 3 fights. Just wow. Just wow.
Now boxing's first ever undisputed super middleweight champion of the world.
First place, Gennady Golovkin, 3. After becoming the undisputed champion, Canelo decided to go after new heights, namely to become the light heavyweight champion. He had really Napoleonic days, but today's hero didn't count his power. His opponent was the WBA super champion Dmitry Bivol. According to many people, the Mexican was the heavy favorite, but he was outclassed. The Russian showed a great performance and became known all over the world, also being included in the P4P rating. Now the access to a new weight class was closed, and he had to return to his kingdom and protect his borders. And then he had a great chance to close the story with Gennady Golovkin, his old rival from the old category. They had met as many as 2 times before. The first fight ended in a draw.
This is officially a draw,
which caused a lot of resentment because of his results. The second fight was more competitive, and this time the winner was again the Mexican, but still there were disputes about the result. This time it was an opportunity to close all the questions in the third fight. GGG considered the first fights as unfair to him, so in the third fight, he wanted to knock him out for sure, not to let the fight fall into the hands of the judges. There was no animosity between them, however. The fighters recognized each other as equal and had a genuine respect for each other. The second meeting started identically to the second one. Canelo pressed and aggressively attacked his opponent with power blows. The tactic proved to be effective. Thanks to this tactic, he was able to outbox his opponent in the number of punches and caused him serious problems. From round to round, he was gaining momentum and putting fear into his old friend, establishing control of the ring. Gennady tried to work as the second number and was constantly punching jabs, but it was of little effect against such an opponent. After the third round, Canelo started using more body blows and slowed his opponent down. It seemed that in such a manner the fight would not come to the judges' decisions, but such a high tempo affected the Mexican, and he soon got tired and gave up the initiative. The Kazakh regained the momentum and opened his second breath. The fighter stormed off, made a lot of exchanges in the close range and handled it well. Showed a good level even at 40 years old, but it wasn't enough to win. Saul took 8 rounds in a row from the first and took a solid unanimous decision victory. The questions are finally closed. All that's left is respect. Canelo is one of the best boxers in the world today, undisputed super middleweight champion and world champion in 4 weight classes, the man of the era. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and write what you think about Canelo in the comments. Gloved Gladiators was with you. Bye.